Ready? Okay, good evening. This is the Transeint Guest Tax Committee. It's Friday, February 14th. I'm Richard Harmon. With the other committee members, state your appearances, please.
Elaine Schwartz.
Nathan Schmidt.
Thank you. We have two items on the agenda. The first one is discussion of possible action regarding historic tourism improvement grant guidelines. Mr. Fyander, are you prepared to bring the committee up to speed on that issue?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day. After our last meeting, staff was able to sit down, legal planning sat down with Chris Meinhardt, Grant Glenn, and Greg Allen to discuss the guidelines in a little more open-ended fashion, and I think it was a very positive, very constructive meeting. We conferred, and really what you have before you is what we agreed upon for the most part, and as Chris and I both talk, nothing is obviously perfect, but I feel very good about this, and there weren't a lot of what I would call substantive changes necessarily, but I think there was a lot of clarifications that went on with the guidelines, what words meant, what the intentions were. So I think the big thing is we tried to mimic, or actually reflect, the exact wording from the ordinance in the guidelines. And I think that helped everybody understand where this was going. As you see under the background and objectives, there are three items there. And the first one is what the improvement grants are concerned with. The first one is restoring and preserving sites listed on local, state, or national register of historic places that are not private or primarily commercial in nature, unless open or intended to be open to the public on a regularly scheduled basis. We're calling these sort of the bricks and mortar. That's the bricks and mortar. That's the construction, preservation. We did define improvements also to include professional services for architectural and design purposes. So I think that in of itself kind of clarified that the improvement grants that we're talking about are for that. And then 2 and 3 up on top for marketing the city's historical assets, and then also providing that match from other government and private sources. Those really speak to the planning and marketing guidelines, which is the second item on your agenda. So under both scenarios, I think we didn't want to mess with the wording that's already in the ordinance. We just reflected it straight there. I think that helped a lot. And then just cleaned up some of the clarifications under eligible properties, eligible activities, eligible applicants. We kept in the matching funds not being a requirement, changed the wording at Mr. Schmidt's suggestions to give more consideration to those applicants that do have matching contributions. And then lastly, we discussed a little bit, although we kind of see what you think, the deadlines and the time of submissions at the bottom there. We wanted to keep in mind, number one, we want to get this out on the street. Construction season's coming up, so we want to be deliberate about it. We wanted to give people a fair chance to apply, knowing there's a narrow scope here of applicants, but still, our suggestion is 30 days. Give people a 30-day turnaround time, which is still a little tight, but I think that's probably is fair, knowing we want to be deliberate about it. Then give the grant review committee a couple weeks, staff the process, get them to review it, and then lastly, make their recommendations to you. We want to recognize that we want to have some continuity. This body in April typically could change over. So we want to get that to you in early April so that you do have a chance to weigh in and have that you've been through enough meetings on this. I think you deserve the chance to look at these recommendations coming before you. So that's the idea. We made sure that at least it could get to you by the second week in April. So, but it's all I really have to cover right now. And we just, in regards to the second item on the agenda, again, we did the same thing. We just did some clarifications, reflected the exact wording in the ordinance. And the big thing here, again, as was last time, we want to hear them all together. We want to hear both applications for improvements as well as planning and marketing all together, and the decisions could be made as a package.
Bill, where in the document does the consideration that Councilmember Schmidt mentioned about 2 meetings ago, where is that in the, can you point to some language?
Yeah, under first page, eligible activities, the second paragraph should address matching, or it starts matching funds from the applicant are not required to receive grants for improvements. And then we say, however, more consideration will be given to those applicants.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That demonstrate.
Great. Very good. And we have 2 documents before us. We have the actual grants application, and then we have the planning and marketing grants application guidelines. So these need to be adopted separately?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what we're talking about now is the application itself. Is that correct? Or are we talking about the application guidelines?
They go together. So we've combined the guidelines for the application and the application form are combined in your handout. So the first 2 pages are the guidelines in the process. The last 4 pages are the form itself.
So what's this other document then?
Which,
I think you're referring to this one
Right.
as the other.
Well, no, this is, Bill, we have 2 documents in front of us.
correct. So
Which one have you been talking about the grants application, or have you been talking about the application guidelines? Which of these 2 are you talking about?
the title is Heritage Tourism Improvement Grants Application.
Okay,
And then you have the second document is the Heritage Tourism Planning and Marketing Grants Application Guidelines, of which I can see that's maybe the confusion.
Yes.
It's really should just say application on the, and strike guidelines there. It's applications for both types of grants here that you have.
so these are both applications.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, does the committee have any questions, Mr. Finder, Ms. Schwartz?
Yeah, but one is like for 15% of the fund, so that's the planning and
Yes.
marketing grants are the 15%, so that's what they're looking at is planning and marketing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then I have another question, Bill. When it says that are not private or primarily commercial in nature, what is the definition of primarily commercial in nature? I mean, I can understand that we wouldn't want private entities and even possibly commercial, but primarily commercial, what does that mean?
In my mind, I would say that if you have a purely for-profit, I mean, most of these are going to be nonprofits.
Right.
Right. So if it's a for-profit venture, then I think that's kind of what primarily commercial would address. So we don't want to. We want to have a little more narrow scope. This is mainly for public benefits, addressing nonprofit run organizations that have something open to the public.
And most historic sites are nonprofit or public.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
I mean, that's.
Correct. And I can't give you an example of what wouldn't be what would be primarily commercial and a historic site.
Yeah.
So,
would you have a problem if we took out primarily and just said are private or commercial in nature?
well, I don't have, this is the exact wording of the codified ordinance for this fund. It
Okay,
sets up the
so
fund. I
that's
didn't
in
come
it.
up with this.
Okay,
It was, so we just, instead of opening up to interpretation, we just kept everything in there the way it
Okay.
was written. And I think as long as there's an understanding, I think there was, of what it means or what, then
Okay.
we were okay with that. But you're right. I think we're not gonna probably have a commercial
Right.
application come in. So,
Right.
okay.
Mr. Schmidt?
I would agree with keeping primarily in there. I think, we don't want the Constitution Hall Fun Park, but if Constitution Hall has a gift shop where you can buy pictures or something, there's some commercial aspect to it, but not that it's some sort of theme park. I do have another question on the dates.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed you put that the week of April 7th, and since I'm the junior member on this committee, my understanding is that on the 8th, which would be the second Tuesday in April, we would have new committees. Is that correct? Or I know that's when we elect new committees, but I'm not sure about appointments for this board.
Well, and Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't actually, we won't do it that soon. Typically, once you elect the deputy mayor, then we all submit our request for what committees we want to be on. Typically, it doesn't happen that week.
Okay. I just
So-
wanted to make sure that we weren't limiting ourselves to one day, the
No.
Monday before that.
No, Jenny, is that consistent with your understanding?
I think they have until May 1st to get those committees together.
Okay, so. Anybody have any other questions?
I would, if it's all right with the rest of the committee, if anybody else has anything that they wanted to say on this.
Mr. Glenn? Oh, Chris, whichever.
I'll go first and you can follow up. I'm Grant Glenn, and I met with the city attorney's office along with Mr. Fionder last week to discuss our concerns about the prior guidelines. And I want to say that he has made a wonderful effort to make these conform with the original ordinance. And I know the prejudice was about making minimal changes, but these were all good changes from I'm a lawyer by trade, and from a standpoint of minimizing the questions, it reduces them. I mean, there's always going to be some vagaries in the ordinance, as you say, what is primarily commercial. I mean, I don't know if we know, but I would submit that leaving it as it's worded in the ordinance is really the best way, because then we're only dealing with one set of potential problems rather than compounding them, and we just saw a lot of that. So we mostly discussed, actually we only discussed the bricks and mortar guidelines, the 85%. We understood that the others needed to be revised, but that's where we were. But staff did I think a wonderful job in a short amount of time once we were able to meet, to be able to get back here and be on this ambitious schedule. And I think the people that will be applying have been waiting for a long time, and having a 30-day window is really quite a bit of time when you know that this is coming down and the actual application has been pretty well known all along. So I do salute the staff for doing a fine job.
Thank you. Mr. Meinhardt?
May I, at the same time, in words, echo what Mr. Glenn has said. Mr. Finder and all have done a wonderful job in seeing to some concerns. I don't have requests for any changes, but I'd like to call attention, and for the record, we have, it's fine that it's in here. We did discuss leaving out the amount because we don't really know the amount, but it says estimated. So we're concerned somewhat with that yet. It's not, I don't think it's a critical thing here. I mentioned to Mr. Finder that I've been attending landmarks and the Tourism Review Committee meetings, and there seems to be an understanding, a valid one, that we ought to make it easy for the city. The city ought to make it easy for us and as citizens, and we ought to make it easy for the city. So I think there's a perception that we all hopefully watch that to be reimbursed is somehow easier for the city. So a lot of people just can't provide that reimbursement. We don't want that to be an evaluation criteria. So I hope Mr. Finder and staff will keep that in mind as they make the presentation to the Tourism Review Committee. I do wish we could move up the process a bit, but I hear you'll be able to review this. If whoever becomes deputy mayor precludes that would be a little unfortunate, but we'll have 5 weeks. If you should pass these today, we'll have 5 weeks, approximately 5 weeks for their passage, or exactly 5 weeks, today being the 14th. The last item, and it might have just got left out, not important to change, but another point of evaluation is that applicants may be asked to appear. I think all applicants, if some are asked, all should be asked. So maybe if Mr. Finder and staff could just keep that in mind. We don't want the Tourism Committee to think that because somebody's been asked, others haven't. That's a good or bad thing. I very much like as a citizen, I like what's been done. I explained to Mr. Finder in an email, just for the record, I wish there were a little bit more time to review the 15% materials, and I just hope it's understood that where it particularly says will be required to follow all building requirements, including codes, permits, and Secretary of Interior design standards. That would be at the date of the passage of these guidelines. We don't really know what's coming down the road. There's some ordinance matters that I think would make it hard for National Register properties to conform to local design guidelines. So I think that's probably a given, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. Anybody else want to address the committee? All right, what's the pleasure of the committee?
I would move to adopt, I guess we're doing, the first one would be the planning and marketing grants application.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion to adopt the Heritage Tourism Planning and Marketing Grants application. It's been moved by Council Member Schmidt, seconded by Council Member Schwartz. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. So the next item would be the Heritage Tourism Improvement and Grants application. Schmidt?
I would make a motion to approve that item as well.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Schmidt, seconded by Councilwoman Schwartz, that we adopt the Heritage Tourism Improvement Grants application. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Before we adjourn, this has been a laborious process and a lengthy one, and I just want to publicly thank Mr. Fiander for his work and contributions, of Mr. Meinhardt, Mr. Glenn, and others who have been unnamed that have also contributed. And I appreciate the work of the committee members in bringing forth their ideas and their insights to this process. It's important to the historical heritage of this city, and I think we have a good product going forward. Any other business to come before the committee? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's been moved. Do we
Second.
adjourn? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.